Let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. If you are a popular loner, you trigger a specific type of person. Not because you were rude, not because you were aggressive, not because you did anything wrong. Simply because you exist in a way that doesn't revolve around them. And that alone is enough. Let's be clear about what a popular loner actually is, because most people get this wrong. A popular loner is not socially awkward. It's not someone who can't make friends. It's not someone bitter, isolated, or antisocial. A popular loner is someone who is known, respected, even admired, but chooses solitude. You can walk into a room and be recognized. You can hold a conversation. You can be charming, funny, intelligent. You can light up a space, but you don't stay. You don't clean. You don't overextend. You don't perform. You don't need the room to like you in order to like yourself. And that right there disrupts people. Now, let's define who gets triggered. I call them the main characters, not in complimentary way. These are people who subconsciously believe everything revolves around them. They need to be seen. They need to be validated. They need to feel chosen. They need to feel like the emotional anchor of the room, of every room they enter. Their internal script reads, I am the star. Everyone else is supporting cast. And for a while, this works. Because most people play along, most people perform, most people audition for roles in someone else's story without even realizing it. But then you show up, self-contained, self-assured, self-sufficient. And you don't audition, you don't try to impress them, you don't try to win them over, you don't decode them, you don't compete, you simply exist. And to someone who measures their worth by the attention they receive, your existence feels like a glitch in their system. Here's their psychological mechanism. When you are popular or loner, your energy is not easily accessible. People can feel you. They are curious about you. They might even admire you, but they can't fully read you. They can't fully own you. They can't fully place you in a box. And that lack of access to someone used to being the center feels like rejection. So their brain creates a story to protect itself. They interpret your boundaries as superiority. They interpret your silence as judgment. They interpret your discernment as arrogance. When in reality, you're just selective. You don't open every door. You don't give everyone front row access to your thoughts. You don't spill your life story to feel connected. You don't attach just because the opportunity is there, but they don't see it that way. All they see is someone they can't control. Let's zoom out for a moment. Most people are still fighting to be picked. Picked as a friend, picked as the partner, picked as the favorite, picked as the most important. They shake their personalities around being accepted. They perform. They overextend. They abandon themselves just to secure a role in someone else's story. But when you've already chosen yourself, you don't compete for attention. You don't fight for position. You don't beg to be seen. You don't need to be written into someone else's storyline because you are fully occupied writing your own. And that disrupts people who need an audience. Because without an audience, their story collapses. Here is something the main characters can't stand. You cannot be manipulated through approval. You don't need the pat on the back. You don't need the constant reassurance. You don't need someone to tell you that you are doing great in order to believe it. You validate yourself. And when someone can't control your self-worth, they feel powerless. Most so-called main characters thrive on emotional reaction. They want you to laugh at their jokes, respond to their moods, match their intensity, validate their narratives. But you observe, you notice inconsistencies. You notice when words don't match actions. You notice subtle competition. You notice when someone is being nice with an agenda. And you don't react. That calm detachment is threatening because if they can't trigger you, they can't dominate the emotional atmosphere. You being self-contained forces people to confront themselves. And most people would rather project onto you than look inward. Let's talk about something rarely discussed. As a popular loner, you are sensitive to energy. You pick up on things that aren't being said. You feel tension before it explodes. You sense jealousy before it surfaces. You recognize insecurity disguised as confidence. So you limit your exposure. Not because you hate people, not because you think you are better, but because you protect your energy like it's sacred. And here is the truth many don't want to accept. When your energy is not easily accessed, it automatically gains value. Scarcity creates intrigue. If you're always available, always explaining yourself, always present, always reacting, there is no mystery, no depth, no edge. But when you can enter a space, enjoy it fully, and then leave when you are ready, that independence is magnetic. You can go out alone. You can travel alone. You can sit in silence and feel fulfilled. You can meet people, laugh, connect, and then detach without guilt. That kind of emotional independence triggers people who depend on constant internal stimulation because they don't know how to sit with themselves. You do, and that's the difference. You will notice something interesting. The more unbothered you are, the more stories people create about you. They will call you stuck up. They will call you cold. They will say you think you're better. They will say you're antisocial. They will say you have a hidden agenda. Why? Because they need a narrative that makes them comfortable. It's easier to label you arrogant than to admit they are insecure. It's easier to call you distant than to admit they crave your attention. It's easier to say you're boring than to admit they are intimidated. You being comfortable with not being liked, that's not the ultimate trigger. Most people shape their personalities around being accepted. They'd rather bend than risk rejection. You don't. You understand that not everyone deserves access to you. You understand that your energy is but limited. And you refuse to drain yourself trying to be everything for everyone. Let's be honest. Many people, many popular loners were not always this way. You may have once been the overgiver, the empath who tried to save everyone, the one who believed your light could heal people, the one who absorbed other people's problems. But you learned something. You learned that not everyone wants to be uplifted. You learned that some people benefit from chaos. You learned that you cannot love someone's self-destruction. And once you understood that, you stopped overextending. You still have a big heart. You still care. You still empathize. But now you have boundaries. And boundaries are offensive to people who benefited from your lack of them. That's another reason you trigger main characters. They remember when you were more accessible. They remember when you were easier to influence. They remember when you were more available. Now you're selective. Now you're calm. Now you're grounded. Now you're unmoved. And they feel the shift. Here's what often happens. Someone will test you. They your calmness and mistake it for weakness. They see your reserve and mistake it for fear. They think because you were quiet, you were an easier target. They quickly learn otherwise. You may be calm, you may be reserved, but you are not weak. And nothing frustrates a main character more than realizing they cannot intimidate you. Because a bully needs a reaction. An insecure ego needs validation. A manipulator needs access. You give them none. So they escalate, they gossip, they create false narratives. They attempt to paint you as the villain. But here's the irony. The more they talk about you, the more relevant you become in their story, while they remain background characters in yours. Let me leave you with this. You are not responsible for managing other people's insecurities. You are not obligated to dim your independence. You are not required to over-explain your boundaries. You are not here to audition for roles in someone else's fantasy. You are here to live your life fully, consciously, and selectively. Yes, that will trigger the main characters. Yes, they will project onto you. Yes, they will create stories to make themselves comfortable, but that's not your burden. You can be kind without being accessible. You can be warm without being available. You can care without caring. The moment you choose yourself, you stopped fighting to be picked. And when you stopped fighting to be picked, you become unforgettable. Not because you demand attention, not because you perform confidence, not because you try to be mysterious, but because you don't need anything from anyone. And in a world where most people are desperately seeking validation, that self-containment is the rarest thing of all.